Good afternoon, everyone. We're likely still going to have some people keep joining us, but we have a lot of things to do today in this session, so I'm going to get started. Welcome to our online training session for building connected communities, adapting to the climate crisis through nature on the New Brunswick Environmental Network's new benefit cost analysis tool for nature-based climate solutions. My name is Lily Barraclough, and I am the project coordinator for this project, which is the Research and Knowledge Initiative, supporting climate risk mitigation for municipalities with nature-based and natural infrastructure here in New Brunswick with the New Brunswick Environmental Network. And we also have my colleague Nat, who is here helping today. You can wave with the tech today, who's our biodiversity and watershed program coordinator as well. This is our last session of our series of training sessions on this tool throughout the last couple months, here in person throughout New Brunswick as well as online. And we're so glad to have you here with us today. The first half of this workshop will be a presentation with some background as well as the chance for some interactive poll responses, which I'll be sharing with you in a moment. And then the latter half of the session today, I'll be doing a full demonstration of the tool with an example and have lots of time for questions at the end. We will feel free throughout to throw any questions in the chat, but we'll answer questions from the chat and from raised hands after the initial presentation and after the demo at the end. That's because we're supposed to have a pretty large group today and want to make sure that we're able to get through everything. So before I really get started into the workshop today, I want to take the time to acknowledge that I am presenting to you here today from the unceded and traditional and contemporary lands of the Mi'kmaq here in Moncton, New Brunswick. But here at the NBN, we work across the province of New Brunswick, which is on the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, and Passamaquoddy peoples. And as we consider adapting and mitigating climate change, it's incredibly important to ensure that we're taking the time to meaningfully engage with decolonization, especially since so many of the techniques and approaches towards nature-based climate solutions draw on traditional knowledge of the Indigenous communities across this land. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with us here at the NBEN, we are a communication network that links over 110 nonprofit environmental organizations throughout New Brunswick. And we have different collaboratives and caucuses made up of member groups focused on different aspects of environmental protection in the province, with one of our long-standing collaboratives being focused on climate change adaptation. And this work we're on nature-based climate solutions, it's out of our climate change adaptation collaborative. And we've done work on nature-based solutions in New Brunswick for about the last 6 years. We started with some primarily education and training-based work for planners and engineers in the province, and then moved on to this current project, which is partially funded through the Research and Knowledge Initiative of Infrastructure Canada and partially funded through New Brunswick Environmental Trust Fund, where we are focused on supporting municipalities and organizations that work closely with municipalities to build capacity to implement nature-based climate solutions. And I'll be getting more into that in just a few minutes. So to start off, I think that we have shared, or we will be sharing, the link for our poll EV in the chat. And just want to hear you. Where are you joining us from? I think we have quite a few folks here from New Brunswick, but also some from outside of the province. So I see we already have one response there, and Nat has just shared the link. So if you want to go to our poll EV link, and you should be able to share where you're joining in from. Yeah, we've got some folks joining us from the West Coast as well. Nova Scotia. And you're welcome to introduce yourselves in the chat as well and share, where you're joining us from and what organization you're here with. Got some good reach across the Atlantic provinces. And all the way to Edmonton as well. Great to see that we have such a wide range of folks joining us today. Although this first iteration of the tool is primarily focused on New Brunswick, we are hoping to obtain funding in the upcoming fiscal year to expand the work outside of New Brunswick to focus on all 4 of the Atlantic provinces. I think starting to slow down a little bit in the responses. I've probably heard from most people. So in just a moment, I'm going to move on to our next little introduction question. All right. So next, should be able to access this on the same Poll EV link. I'm interested to hear what brought you to this training session and what you're hoping to get out of it today. Yeah, definitely getting that buy-in from stakeholders is huge. The major focus of this work is on climate change adaptation, so I'll definitely get to that as well. Yeah, we definitely, a goal of this is to ensure that the tool is helpful in mobilizing action to adapt to climate change and build more nature-based solutions. Great to see that we have a lot of folks here interested in climate change adaptation and how we can incorporate more nature-based solutions. That's definitely, though there are lots of mitigation benefits as well, that is kind of the main approach that we've taken in this work as well. Yeah, our overarching goal with this for sure is helping to better assess feasibility of nature-based solutions. So we know that a big challenge has been estimating cost. Right, and then we're gonna have one more little introductory question before I get into the presentation today. So I'd like to hear, what impacts of climate change have you witnessed in your community? What are the largest challenges that you're facing right now? This could be like on a personal level, but also in terms of the organization or the municipality that you're here today representing. And this, yeah, seeing flooding, that's river flooding, that's a huge issue for sure. Yeah, Hurricane Fiona seeing there quite a bit. Yeah, flooding is definitely coming out as the top issue. Yeah, I've seen a wide range of fires, coastal flooding and erosion, river flooding, severe heat, hurricanes. So this lines up well with a lot of what we'll be talking about today because we have really focused in this first iteration of the tool on flooding and nature-based solutions responding to flooding. But we hope in the future as well to expand to cover different solutions that can respond to things like extreme heat or wildfires as well. I also see some mentions of inequity and kind of the social components of the impacts of climate change. All right. Well, thank you so much for, yeah, you can, I see some more coming in. It's great to have the chance to get a sense of, what's coming up a lot for you folks that are here today and um, what the relevance is of this tool. And I can definitely see coastal flooding and erosion are and flooding, inland flooding as well are kind of the biggest issues, although there are so many more incredibly important issues as well. And that is what we'll be focusing on a lot today. So I'm going to keep going, but if there's anything else that comes up in the chat, you're welcome to throw in your thoughts regarding impacts of climate change or what's brought you to this session as well throughout. I'm going to start on the presentation to give you just a little bit more background on the project as well as what work has been done to this point, leading us to how we developed this tool. So at the start, I mentioned that this is a project that's primarily led by us here at the New Brunswick Environmental Network, but we also work very closely with a team of partners. Our main project partner in this work has been Nature New Brunswick. They are long-standing, knowledgeable experts on nature-based climate solutions and have done a lot of work on coastal solutions, it's particularly through their Healthy Coast New Brunswick program. We also work very closely with representatives on our advisory committee from Climate Atlantic, Infrastructure Canada, the New Brunswick Climate Change Secretariat, the Union of Municipalities of New Brunswick, as well as l'Association francophone des municipalités du Nouveau-Brunswick. And these folks on our advisory committee have provided insight and feedback throughout the development of the tool, both to situate it in those experts in the field of climate change adaptation, but also in terms of the specific needs of municipalities throughout the province. This is a 2-year project that started in 2022. And then the first year of the project, we were focused on understanding the barriers that municipalities and communities face in implementing nature-based solutions, their needs, as well as the public opinion and thoughts regarding nature-based solutions. We held engagement sessions throughout New Brunswick, in Dieppe, Fredericton, Quispamsis, Edmundston, and online, as well as some direct engagement to the members of the Union of Municipalities of New Brunswick, as well as the Francophone Association of Municipalities, to really understand from municipal perspectives what their biggest barriers are to implementing nature-based solutions and how we can help to meet those needs within this project and our future work as well. We also conducted a survey of public opinion with a public polling firm based in Atlanta, Canada, Narrative Research, to understand what the public perception in New Brunswick is of nature-based climate solutions, as well as responses to climate change, and how they're experiencing climate change. And I'll be sharing some of the more key findings that came out of this survey in a moment. And then our largest part of this project, and what you're all here today to hear about, has been the development of our benefit cost analysis tool for nature-based climate solutions. Because in our past work and throughout this project as well, in our engagement sessions, one of the biggest barriers that came up was the uncertainty around the costs associated with nature-based solutions, as well as meaningfully considering the benefits. There are a lot of co-benefits and potential value for residents and the natural environment and communities that aren't always well accounted for, and I'll be going into that in more depth as we go on. There are many definitions that exist of nature-based solutions, and the different types of terminology associated with it. But in this work and in our survey of public opinion, the definition that we have went with, which comes from the World Bank, is that nature-based solutions are actions to protect, sustainably manage, or restore natural ecosystems that address societal challenges such as climate change, human health, food and water security, and disaster risk reduction, while simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. In looking at potential infrastructure responses to impacts of climate change, the main two options are gray or conventional infrastructure, and these are infrastructures that are built from human fabricated materials. They tend to be more energy intensive to construct, and usually more costly, but I'll go into that in a moment. And these are conventional approaches like seawalls, dams, culverts, and pipes. There are also what we're mostly talking about today, nature-based natural infrastructure. And these are infrastructure that either work to protect or restore existing natural ecosystems that effectively help to manage, say, flooding, or help with protecting biodiversity. But it can also be integrating elements into the design of infrastructure that are based on functions in natural ecosystems. And some examples are parks, rain gardens, living shorelines, and naturalized stormwater retention ponds. You can also have hybrid infrastructure, which incorporates elements of nature-based infrastructure with some fabricated, engineered gray infrastructure, and these might be things like living roofs or permeable pavement. There are a lot of really meaningful arguments for using nature-based climate solutions economically, as well as in terms of the socio-ecological benefits that they can bring. But first of all, to emphasize some of those economic benefits, since we're here today to talk about cost-benefit analysis, studies have shown that nature-based solutions are truly a cost-effective alternative to gray infrastructure. And on average, the nature-based solutions cost 51% less to construct than gray infrastructure, and on the whole, they provide 29% more monetary and socio-ecological value compared to traditional built infrastructure. And these are significant amounts. And a big piece of this is because while gray infrastructure, if you build a road or you build a culvert or a seawall, those don't usually provide many recreational or ecological benefits in communities. Whereas if you're building a naturalized stormwater retention pond where you incorporate trails throughout and you incorporate more naturalized elements of the wetlands, this can provide additional habitat for species and also recreational opportunities for residents. And overall, the reason that these costs are so much less is because the upfront capital expenditure to build the infrastructure, and as well as the ongoing maintenance and operation costs, are usually much lower for nature-based climate solutions in comparison to conventional gray infrastructure. Although we want to see an increase in nature-based climate solutions, it is important to mention and acknowledge that there are already a lot of examples of these solutions throughout the country, and many here in Atlantic Canada and in New Brunswick. This is a map of case study examples of nature-based climate solutions that is hosted on our community of practice for nature-based and natural infrastructure, which we'll be sharing the link to if later, as also where the tool is hosted. And this map was started for New Brunswick by us here at the NBN and later expanded to the rest of Canada with support from our partners at Nature Canada. And it includes many different examples of all different scales of nature-based solutions, from rain gardens to community gardens to living shoreline projects and larger restoration, and links to the organizations doing them, as well as some resources. And you can also view some specific site visits and videos documenting the variety and depth of these existing solutions. But although we have seen many different examples throughout New Brunswick as well as elsewhere, it's not enough to respond to the increased threats that we're facing in communities from climate change. As I mentioned earlier, as a part of this project, we conducted a public survey of opinion to understand what the public perception is of nature-based climate solutions. We had 660 online respondents, and these results were collected in February of 2023. And it's important to note that in doing this survey, we ensured that we had a wide range of representative demographics across across New Brunswick. Sorry, this is just for New Brunswick. And so we had a wide representation of different education levels, different levels of income, different age groups, mother tongues, English and French, as well as other, and made sure that we had that representative demographic. One of the first questions that we asked respondents was what, out of this list of potential impacts of climate change, which had they felt the most directly in their community over the past 2 years? By far, the most heavily recognized was the increased cost of food. But following that were warmer winter temperatures, higher winds than normal, and increased frequency and severity of storms. But it was clear from these results that people are feeling these impacts of climate change. This in looking at the results was one of the more striking responses. We asked people on a scale of 1 to 10 how prepared they felt to deal with the impacts of climate change. And looking at kind of 8 to 10 out of 10 as being very prepared. The middle blocks of 5 through 7 to being somewhat prepared, and then the bottom box of like 1 through 4 as being not prepared at all. And on a personal level, 22% of respondents felt that they were prepared personally to respond to the impacts of climate change. But you see this still, like a large proportion felt very unprepared. However, on the government, both the provincial and the municipal government side, only 12% felt that their representatives were prepared to respond to the impacts of climate change. And 35% felt that they weren't prepared at all. So this really indicated to us that residents are not seeing the responses in their communities to respond to the impacts of climate change on a scale that is giving them confidence in their community's ability to respond to the impacts of climate change. We did also ask, how knowledgeable respondents were about existing action on climate change in the province and in their community, and found that although the New Brunswick provincial government had very recently at the time released a new climate action plan that made specific commitments related to nature-based solutions, only 18% of the respondents were familiar with the new climate action plan. And only, I think, 20% of respondents had ever heard of nature-based solutions before taking part in this survey. So following that, we also made sure to do some more public-facing education and held a webinar series focused on highlighting different case studies across Atlantic Canada of different types of nature-based solutions, which you can find on our website as well. In the survey, we provided respondents with a couple scenarios where they would have to choose between a nature-based solution and a conventional solution. And also looking at the different timeframes and scales of the two solutions. I'm just going to pause for a moment to pull the curtain closed because it's very funny. And so in this particular scenario, we were looking at choosing between a solution that could be implemented more quickly, but would be less effective in the long run, which would denote the gray infrastructure human aid solution, versus solution 2 that would take longer to implement, but ultimately be more effective, which reference a nature-based solution. And for the most part, respondents would favor solution 2, a nature-based solution. And you'll find that very few favored the faster solution. So I think this is interesting to note because often we assume that faster is the most important factor in responding to issues. The last piece of results that I'll share from the survey of public opinion came from looking at which types of co-benefits respondents would value the most highly when choosing between different solutions to respond to the impacts of climate change. And by far, the one that was chosen the most was improvements in physical health, mental health, and overall well-being. But this was followed closely by improved water and or air quality, increased economic opportunities such as jobs, and reduction of greenhouse gases. And similar to the previous slide, looking at the scenario of choosing between the two solutions, we also found that people didn't value very highly the shorter time frame to construct the solution or lower cost. So I'm going to shift now to give you a bit of an overview of our process in developing the benefit cost analysis tool and kind of what's included in terms of the scope and the objectives. And then following this, we'll have some time for questions before a short break. So our overarching goal of developing the benefit cost analysis framework and tool is to provide decision makers with a decision-making process to complete approximate cost-benefit ratios for nature-based infrastructure projects. And right now, the scope of the tool is focused on coastal restoration, so looking at living shorelines to respond to flooding and erosion, as well as naturalized stormwater management ponds. But we hope in the future to expand this to incorporate additional types of nature-based solutions to respond to additional issues. So our overarching process in developing this tool was we began by working with consultants at Green Analytics who have worked very closely with other organizations like Natural Asset Initiative and have a lot of very specific knowledge of the costs and monetary values associated with nature-based solutions. And so the first piece of the development was gathering all the information to make up the databases. So they did literature reviews and searches to find all the relevant studies that provide cost estimates for nature-based solutions, different living shoreline approaches, and naturalized stormwater retention ponds. cost estimates for gray infrastructure, so what the alternative would be if you weren't going to do a nature-based solution, as well as monetary value estimates for the different benefits for each nature-based solution. In the development process as well, they also did a bunch of interviews with organizations and municipalities who have built nature-based climate solutions in New Brunswick, as well as in Atlantic Canada, to understand what some of the realistic and real-time costs were, as well as what some of the barriers had been. And once the initial framework full decision-making process document was developed, it was reviewed and tested by the City of Dieppe, the City of Fredericton, and the Town of Tantramar here in New Brunswick, where they reviewed the materials and provided us with feedback and input to make it more applicable and useful in the municipal decision-making process. Taking into account the input of those communities, we worked with our web developer to adapt the full framework report, which is like a 40-page report, into an interactive web tool, which is what I'll be sharing with you in the second half today. And we're currently in the process of providing training on the tool throughout New Brunswick and online. And our ultimate goal in the development of this tool is to effectively support municipalities in implementing nature-based climate solutions and advance the use of them throughout Atlantic Canada. So what's included in what we provide relating to the framework are the Excel databases of nature-based climate solutions, benefit, monetary value estimates, the nature-based climate solutions cost database, the gray infrastructure cost database, a template Excel version cost benefits ratio calculator, a full case study example and example calculations, which is what I'm sharing. I'll be going through today in the tool. And we do now have our interactive web tool that takes users through all the steps of the framework. You'll see later when I do the demonstration of the tool that there is a link to download all the Excel databases as well as the full framework report, so you can go review it in depth if you would like. So with that, we'll be sharing the links to access the tool in the chat so you can follow along during the demonstration later. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'd be happy to take any questions that have come up during the initial presentation about the project in total or process. You can either write your questions in the chat or raise your virtual hand and unmute and ask the question. Yes, and Nat has just shared the link to the tool in the chat. It is available in both languages, although we'll be going through it in English today, since this is an English training session. Yeah, so I see a question in the chat on how long municipalities were given to review the tool and were they provided with specific instructions and training prior to review. So our consultants at Green Analytics went through the framework process with the municipalities directly. So they met over Zoom and were guided through the process. And then they were asked to give input in terms of looking at all the different steps in the process in terms of adapting it. But they were also involved throughout the development process. So our consultants met with them at the beginning of the development and as questions came up to get insight as well. The web version of the framework wasn't directly reviewed by municipalities, but it is the same process as the framework that was reviewed. But we are, as this is the first iteration of the tool, we are still taking any input and comments and feedback and suggestions to continuously improve it. I hope that answers your question. Are there any other questions that are coming up for folks at this time? All right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions or any hands that have been raised. So with that, we're gonna take about a 10-minute break before we get into the full demonstration of the tool. I need to get a few things set up on my end. So if folks could return around 1:50, 10 to 2 Atlantic time, so in about 10 minutes, that would be great, and we'll start the full demonstration of the tool. And there will be other time for questions as well if more come up. Oh, thank you for, I thought I had already restarted the recording. That's appreciated. Luckily, it was before I actually got into using the tool. So we're going through the full illustrative example from the framework document. And in this example, we're assuming that there's a New Brunswick community located in the lower portions of a watershed. This community was built within the floodplain of the river system. The forested area in the upper portions of the watershed is regularly harvested, and other portions of the watershed have been cleared for agricultural production. As a result of historical land use developments combined with increasing rainfall from a changing climate, the community is experiencing increased flood risk in the lower portion of the watershed. In the upper half of the watershed, there is a strategic area that has been identified for enhancing and enlarging existing wetlands, as well as creating new wetlands that would restore natural features and functions to rural areas. The restoration of existing wetlands and creation of new wetlands can significantly mitigate storm and flood waters that flow from the upper watershed down through urbanized areas. And in this example, with the restoration and enlarging of existing wetlands and creating new ones, it would also include recreational opportunities like building of trails and opportunities for education and engagement with nature. So in this initial stage of the tool, it's just giving you the chance to give some details of the project. This doesn't actually affect the results of the tool, but it's your chance to lay out what your project is and kind of the different components of it. And in this case, we're doing a hypothetical community, but you would likely describe the exact target location within your community, whether that's like a specific area of the town or a specific like region. So in this case, in the example, it mentions that for parts of the watershed are forested and regularly harvested. Parts of it have been cleared for agricultural production. So this is essentially just considering, what local conditions may have caused impacts or hazards relating to the climate issue. And then this last question is going to just think about what some of the potential co-benefits are. In this case, we have recreation, tourism, use of the trails, improvements in biodiversity, and as well as more that we'll get into as we go on. So once you submit that, it leads you to the next stage, and we do have a little form for feedback. So at the end, if you have any feedback after using the tool, later, you can give us some feedback as we're continuously hoping to improve the tool. But you'll see here that information that we put in the introduction is now given in a little box here. So now to start the actual calculation part, you click New Assessment. And we recommend, actually, I'll just go back for a moment. Here you go. Yeah. We recommend for your first time through an assessment for a specific project, you do kind of a baseline average assessment. So that uses mid-range values to give you a kind of like overarching estimate. But then you can go repeat the process with different assumptions. So you do one with more conservative assumptions. So this would be assuming that the benefits don't start until later, until after an extra number of years. And then you can also do less conservative assumptions. So this would assume that the value from the benefits would start from year 0. You'll see when we go through the baseline example that most cases the benefits start after the first 10 years, except for flood risk reduction, which is after the first 5. Today we'll be doing the baseline estimate. So we'll go New Assessment. And here you'll start assessment. Again, this is just a brief description, so we'll do example baseline. And then in the description, this is average baseline values. And this first step of the calculation is incredibly important as it dictates the results that you'll get throughout the tool. You'll notice that we have tooltips available at each step, which provide you with more information. So in this first step, you have to determine what discount rate you'll be using. Discount rates account for the time value of money, so they convert future costs and benefits into present value terms. This means we consider, when we think about future costs, the value of money decreases over time. So what something is worth in today's monetary value will be worth less in the future. So we have to take this into account when looking at monetary estimates. Typically, the Treasury Board of Canada recommends a default discount rate of 7% or a social discount rate of 3%. And in this case, using the social discount rate is recommended because there are factors beyond just economic opportunity costs that need to be considered, namely environmental goods and services, as well as human health benefits. This is something you can put in yourself, though. So in this case, we'll do the 3%, but you can go back and try it with different levels. We also link to a discount rate table, which you'll see here. It provides links to different studies that have estimated or used different discount rates for different approaches to climate nature-based pollution. In this case, we're looking at wetland restoration. So in most cases, it's around 2 or 3%. And then for time frame, it is recommended in most studies to use a minimum of a 50-year time frame to meaningfully see an estimate for the benefits to get a more accurate estimate. But you can change this. You could do it on a longer time frame, looking over 100 years, or you could look on a short time frame if you're like thinking of planning, say, for the next 10 or 20 years. This next step is identifying which type of nature-based climate solution you're looking at. So in this case, we're looking at wetland and salt marsh restoration. But we have multiple different approaches to living shorelines, beach nourishment and sand dune restoration, oyster reef restoration, seagrass and sea meadow restoration, as well as naturally stormwater ponds. And for each of these, we give a little bit of a description of how it can help, so what impacts of climate change it can support, and what issues it addresses. So for wetlands, this can help with attenuating flooding, stabilizing shore sediment, preserving habitat, and it helps to address flooding, biodiversity loss, and water quality degradation. So this next step is identifying the expected benefits of the project. And this gives, again, references some of the ones you may want to consider. In this case, in this example, we're looking at benefits of biodiversity, carbon sequestration, flood protection and mitigation, recreation and tourism, as well as water quality enhancement. There was a question in the chat about considerations of socio-ecological values. And we did, in terms of looking at the anticipated benefits, try to take some of that into account with things like recreation. So considering like the benefits for mental and physical health, as well as like air quality and water quality are things that can drastically impact human health. We also looked at education. However, it is like we were limited by the values that are available in the literature. But we hope to continuously improve this. So hopefully, as we work on future iterations of the tool, we'll also expand what benefits are considered. Once you've selected the benefits, you can add in more details, say if there's a specific aspect of the benefit you're looking for, and this would help find the best matches for similar projects in the databases. For now, we're just gonna leave it blank. So this next step is where we actually estimate the monetary values of each of the benefits. And you're given here a table of average estimates for annual monetary value for benefits and the approach. So in your first time through, you could try to choose values that align with kind of those average ones. So in this case, for biodiversity, you can either enter a custom value if you have a value in mind, or you can use a value from the database, which is what we'll do. And it brings up all the relevant values from the database pertaining to wetlands and biodiversity. But you can also limit it, which provides you with kind of a low range value, mid range, and a high range value. In this case, the value that we're going to go with is this 19,000. I am basing it off of the estimated value provided in the full framework case study that was developed by our consultants. But ultimately, with the piece of choosing which values from the database to use is where you kind of have to make that decision as an individual user based on your existing knowledge of your project and what you're looking at, and as well. But if you go into the full databases, it gives even links to each of these studies if you wanted to look in more depth and make sure you're choosing the right one. But although this doesn't give you the perfect answer, it doesn't like feed it to you in each question, it does bring all of the values together in one place. So hopefully saving you a lot of time. The next piece is inputting the size of the project. So in this case, in the example, we're looking at 110 hectare wetland restoration. And here we're given in the example that the benefit would start to accrue at year 10. So as I mentioned at the beginning, if you were to go back and repeat different sensitivity analyses, you would alter this so you could do it where the benefit accrued at year 1, or you could do it where it accrued at year 15, so you could see kind of the different possibilities, because ultimately this is all a best estimation. And then this gives the total estimated value over the 50 years. And then you do essentially the same process for each of the benefits. So for carbon sequestration, we're using a value from the database. You can limit the options. And in this case, we're choosing this mid-range value here. Again, the size is 110 hectares. In this case, the benefit will start to accrue at year 10. And for each of the benefits, it is accrued the same amount of every year, pretty much. And you repeat the process for flood protection and mitigation. So in this case, again, looking at the values, trying to choose a mid-range value. So we're either looking at this 312 or 436. This one is more related to coastal, so we'll select the 312. Right, and then this is also 110 hectares. And in this case, for the flood protection and mitigation, the value starts after year 5. So now we have recreation and tourism. This is considering opportunities for like hiking and nature walks. And in this example, we're using this 491 per hectare per year. And it is the 110 hectare. And in this case, the benefit would start to accrue after year 10 as well. And then our last benefit estimate is looking at water quality enhancement. So again, we're going to use a unit value from the database. And we're going to select that limit options. And here, we're going to select that mid-range 7,500 value. This is for 110 hectare again. And the benefit for this starts to accrue after 10 years. So now we've completed the benefits section of the ratio. So we'll go next. So this step takes into account the money that would be saved if you were to select the nature-based climate solution over green infrastructure solution. Because as I mentioned in the early part of this workshop, in most cases, the nature-based solution is going to be more cost-effective, so there would be money saved by avoiding the green infrastructure. And in this case, in the example, it would have been a stone revetment if the wetland restoration was not completed. So it's a similar process using unit value from the database. And I'm keeping an eye on the questions in the chat in case any of them are quick to answer as I go, but for the ones so far, I'll get to them after the demo. They take a bit more time to respond to. And in this case, it provides for the cost estimates for green infrastructure. It tends to be a large variety. And in this example, the one that is recommended was the 700,000. The stone revetment would be 4.5 hectares versus 110. And this would be over 5 years because it's looking at the cost to construct it, which would take 5 years. And in this case, that would be distributed across the 5 years with 50% of the cost in year 1, 25% in year 2, 15% in year 3, and 5% for years 4 and 5. We go to the next, and now we're looking at the estimates for the cost side. So we provided this little table here to give you an idea of what costs are usually considered for nature-based solutions. And in this case, it includes capital expenditure, so that's funds required to construct, plan, develop the solution, operational expenditure, which is kind of that ongoing maintenance and monitoring of the solution, and opportunity costs. So that's the value that's lost from using the land for the infrastructure instead of what it would have been used for otherwise. In this case, the opportunity cost is the lost value opportunity for agriculture. So here you select the ones that are relevant. So it's capital expenditure, operational expenditure, and opportunity cost. And in this case, we are looking at two operational costs, management and administration. So this will provide us with two opportunities to estimate those costs. And we'll go next. And it's a similar process for the cost estimation. We provide this summary table to give you an idea of kind of the average cost for each approach. And then you're able to draw from the database. So in the case of the capital expenditure, we're looking at kind of this mid-range value of 16,000, which is from a wetland restoration of a similar project in Ontario. It does, for the cost, it is a bit more challenging as there are a lot of wide variety of different values. So I would recommend using that limit option in most cases. But you can also, like, you kind of have to just make a call in terms of what value you're going to use. And we do give you information relating to what studies those were taken from. So in this case, we're looking at the same project that's the 110 hectares. And the cost would be over 5 years, as we're assuming it would take about 5 years to construct the wetlands. And in this example, although often the capital expenditure distribution is as given here, for this example, it's a slightly different one, 30% in year 1, 25% in year 2, 20 in year 3, 15 in year 4, and 10% in year 5. This gives you the total estimated capital expenditure for building the wetlands. Next, we look at the operational management cost. And in this case, it's drawing on this value, higher value in 110 hectares. And for this one, it's one is every year, as that management occurs throughout the project. Same thing with the administration costs. And in the example, we use this 2,100 value for 110 hectares. And again, it's every year, same amount. And our final cost is the opportunity cost. So that's the lost value of not using the land for agriculture. We're going to draw on the database. In this case, there's only two relevant values. So you can either take the average or choose the lower, the higher. In this case, we're going to go with the lower estimate. This is for the 110 hectares. And again, this is every year, the same amount. So now we've reached the end of the process of estimating the different costs. So we're going to submit the assessment. And it might take a moment to load, but this will give us our full results. And again, it will give you the opportunity, you can give feedback. So here in the final step, it provides you with the estimate of the monetary value for total benefits, the estimate for total costs, that total costs in today's monetary value, and then the final benefit cost ratio. If the benefit cost ratio is over 1, typically you assume that that means that the benefits outweigh the costs. If it's less than 1, the costs outweigh the benefits. So in this case, in the example, the benefits do outweigh the costs. You're also able to view the full results, and this will take you to a breakdown of what each step provided. And it also links you to be able to print the results and edit your answers. So I know there were a couple of questions in the chat, which get to, but now's the time that I'll take questions. You're welcome to write them in the chat or raise your hand. We have a lot of time left in the session, so I'm happy to answer all and every question as best I can. Just gonna stop sharing my screen, but I will reshare it if there's something that I need to demonstrate. So I'll respond to the questions in the chat so far. First, I see the question from Melanie. Did the contractors consult with or work with the International Institute for Sustainable Development's NBI Global Resource Center? Short answer is I'm not sure. They didn't work directly with them, but they may have consulted the resources. That is something I can look into. Definitely happy to learn about any additional resources that we can consult and integrate into this work. In terms of the next question from Veronique, it seems to have a big difference with the choice of benefits. How do you explain your choice to a municipality, for example? I assume you mean in terms of the value for each of the benefits. I think that this is definitely the part of the process that is the most challenging, is determining which value to use. I would say that with your first time through an assessment, you want to use kind of those mid-range baseline values, and you can, say that these are average values drawn on different studies in the literature. So it's very evidence-based, but you can also, if you download the full databases that the tool is based on, you can find the specific value in the resulting study, and you can link it more directly. So if you want to find the study that represents the project you're looking to do the best, and you can really emphasize to a municipality that the value of the study that the value comes from is a very similar project, so it's very similar community, then that can provide additional argument towards using it. So I see the next question from Teal. Will cost and benefit examples from an Atlantic Canada context be incorporated in the tool in the future iterations? They already are. So right now in the tool itself, you don't see the full examples or case studies, but in the full framework document, we have at least 5 or 6 different examples of nature-based solutions across Atlantic Canada. Although most of them are from New Brunswick, there are a few from Nova Scotia and PEI. And we're hoping in 2024 and 2025 to really expand it to incorporate all 4 Atlantic provinces. We are just waiting on confirmation of funding. And we're also in the process of developing some in-depth case studies using the tool, which might actually have been your question. So we will have, in the next month or so, some in-depth case studies of New Brunswick communities using the tool. And hopefully when we receive more funding to expand the tool, we'll then have case studies of other Atlantic provinces using the tool and applying those values. I see the next question. Is there somewhere on the tool that shows you all the choices or values you input to get the end value? We're currently in the process of doing this. You can go back and edit your answers so you are able to see all of the answers throughout your assessments. That last summary page that I showed you, right now it doesn't give you each of the choices, but we're working with the developer to make sure that it does. We know that that is something that would be desirable for users. At this point, the easiest thing would be to take screenshots at each of the steps if you want to, if you need to be able to reference it and go back, or just have them open on different tabs. So you can have multiple, you can't go back and look at the answers and edit them. Are there any other questions? So I see another question. What are the next steps for establishing other nature-based solutions in the tool? Do you have a list of nature-based solutions you're prioritizing for addition? We have not determined what those solutions would be yet. Once we obtain more funding for the project, our first part of the next iteration of the tool would be to work with our partners in all 4 of the Atlantic provinces to engage with municipalities further to understand what, after flooding, what their biggest issues are in terms of climate change that they're facing, to then identify which nature-based solutions would be most useful for us to include. In our first engagement portion of this project, flooding was the most commonly identified, which is why we focused on that. And others that were mentioned were heat waves and like urban heat island effect. So those are potentially things that we might include in the future. But we would be doing more engagement with stakeholders to prioritize what nature-based solutions we would add in. We're happy to, if anyone has suggestions or insights as well at this point, but we will be doing more engagement and research to develop those further iterations. Thanks for the comment, Nat. We have heard from multiple groups that they are hoping to use the tool to support grant applications. So we hope that that will be the case and be useful. So I see the question chat from Hilcon. Can you elaborate on how gray infrastructure costs were developed and what is included, especially given the significant increase in material prices? Operations and maintenance included in this cost as a cost to the owner. For the first part of your question, all the values in the database were adjusted for inflation. So they should be representative of the realistic cost of the materials. In terms of the operations and maintenance, if that's included as a cost to the owner, I'm not entirely sure. The gray infrastructure, my understanding with the alternate gray infrastructure cost is that it's primarily focused on the capital expenditure right now, but as it's looking at the cost of developing the gray infrastructure rather than the cost over time, but that might be a limitation that we need to expand in the future. So that's a really good question. And I may follow up with our consultants to clarify that. Is there any other questions that are coming up? You're welcome to raise your hand and unmute as well if there are. All right, well, I don't see any other questions right now.